I watched the maintenance truck pull away from my property line, leaving behind a chemical smell so strong it made my eyes water, and I knew immediately that Debra Hutchins from the HOA had gone too far this time. My name is Yuri Sanchez, and I'd spent the last 5 years turning my 3-acre property in Gainesville, Florida, into something special. The centerpiece was a natural pond I had built myself, complete with native plants, fish, and a thriving ecosystem that attracted all kinds of wildlife. It was my retirement project, my sanctuary after 30 years working as an environmental engineer. The irony of what was about to unfold was not lost on me. It was a Tuesday morning in March when I first noticed something was wrong. I'd gone out to feed the koi, a morning ritual I cherished with my coffee in hand. The water, which had always been clear with just a hint of that natural pond green, looked different. There was an oily sheen on the surface, and the smell hit me before I even reached the edge. Chemical, sharp, wrong. My fish were dead, all of them, floating belly up among the lily pads I had carefully positioned last spring. My hands started shaking as I set down my coffee cup on the wooden dock I had built. 30 koi, some of them over 10 years old, specimens I had hand-selected and cared for like pets. Gone. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures, my engineering training kicking in even through my shock and anger. Document everything. That is what I had learned in my career. Evidence first, emotions later. I was photographing the dead fish when I heard the golf cart approaching. Debra Hutchins was 62 years old, had been HOA president for the last 8 years, and treated our neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. She wore her usual uniform, pressed khaki pants, a polo shirt with the Meadowbrook Estates logo embroidered on it, and a visor that somehow made her look even more severe. Her blonde bob had not moved an inch in any weather condition I had ever witnessed. "Good morning, Yuri," she called out, her voice carrying that artificial cheerfulness that made my skin crawl. "I see you noticed our mosquito control treatment." I stood up slowly, trying to keep my voice level. "Debra, what exactly did you put in my pond?" "Oh, just some routine mosquito control chemicals. We have had complaints about the mosquito population, and your pond is a breeding ground. It is in the HOA covenant, Section 12, Paragraph 4. We have the right to maintain pest control on all properties for the health and safety of the community. This is a private pond on my property. You had no right to dump anything in it without my permission." She pulled out a folder from her golf cart, because of course she had come prepared. "Actually, according to the Environmental Impact Clause, any standing water that could affect the community falls under HOA jurisdiction. I have it right here. You signed this when you purchased the property. I had read that covenant front to back before buying my house. I knew every word of it. That clause refers to abandoned pools and drainage issues. This is a maintained decorative pond with a functioning ecosystem." "It is a mosquito breeding ground," she said, her voice hardening. "I've received 17 complaints in the last month. The board voted, and we took action. If you have an issue with it, you can attend the next board meeting and file a formal complaint." "My fish are dead, Debra, all of them." She glanced at the floating koi without any visible emotion. "That is unfortunate. But mosquitoes carry diseases. West Nile virus, Zika, dengue fever. We have to think about the greater good of the community. I am sure you understand." "What chemical did you use?" "I do not have that information with me right now, but I can email you the product name later today." "I want it now. I want to know exactly what you dumped in my pond." Her expression shifted, and I saw something behind her eyes that made my stomach turn. It was not just stubbornness or bureaucratic inflexibility. It was calculation. "As I said, I will email you the information. Now, if you will excuse me, I have other properties to inspect. Have a good day, Yuri." She drove off before I could respond, leaving me standing on my dock surrounded by dead fish and the acrid smell of whatever poison she had authorized. I spent the next hour collecting water samples in mason jars. Old habits from my engineering days. I had contacts at the university lab, people who owed me favors from consulting work I had done over the years. If Debra thought I was going to let this slide, she had severely underestimated who she was dealing with. By noon, I'd collected samples from 3 different areas of the pond at various depths. I also scooped up one of the dead koi and put it in a sealed bag. Tissue analysis might tell us something the water samples would not. My hands were steadier now that I had a plan. Action always helped with the anger. I drove to the University of Florida campus and found Professor Chen in his usual spot, hunched over a mass spectrometer in the environmental chemistry lab. We had worked together on several contamination cases over the years, and he was one of the few people I trusted completely when it came to chemical analysis. "Yuri," he said, looking up from his work, "I've not seen you in months. What brings you here?" I set the samples on his workbench. "I need a full analysis, everything you can find, priority if possible." He picked up one of the jars, holding it up to the light. "What am I looking for?" "My HOA claims they dumped mosquito control chemicals in my pond, but something does not feel right about this." Professor Chen frowned. Mosquito larvicides should not kill fish if used properly. The common ones target insect growth hormones. What makes you suspicious? "Just a gut feeling. And the fact that the HOA president seemed very evasive when I asked her exactly what they used. I can have preliminary results by tomorrow afternoon. Full analysis will take about a week." "Tomorrow works. Thank you, Chen." I went home and spent the rest of the day cleaning up dead fish and trying to salvage what I could from the pond. My plants were already showing signs of distress, leaves browning at the edges. 3 frogs I had never seen dead before floated near the rocks. A turtle I had named Sherman, who had lived in this pond since I built it, was missing. I hoped he had crawled out to safety, but I was not optimistic. Debra never sent that email. I checked my inbox every hour through the evening, growing more irritated with each empty refresh. At 8 p.m., I called her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message, keeping my voice professional. "Debra, this is Yuri Sanchez. I'm still waiting for that email about the chemicals used in my pond. Please send me the product name and safety data sheet as soon as possible. Thank you." No response. The next morning, I drove to the HOA office, a small building at the front of our development that Debra had somehow convinced the board to renovate with our dues money. It looked more like a luxury real estate office than a community management space. The receptionist, a young woman named Vanessa, who always seemed uncomfortable with her boss, looked up nervously when I walked in. "Is Debra available?" "She is in a meeting right now. Can I schedule you for later this week?" "No, I will wait." I sat down in one of the expensive leather chairs and pulled out my phone. I was not leaving until I got answers. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably at her desk, typing on her computer and occasionally glancing at me like I was a bomb that might explode. 20 minutes later, Debra emerged from her office with another HOA board member, Gerald something or other, a retired dentist who nodded along with everything Debra said. She saw me and her expression hardened. "Yuri, you need to make an appointment if you want to discuss HOA business. I want the name of the chemical you used. You said you would email me yesterday. You did not. I have been very busy. I will get to it when I have time." I stood up. "Debra, you poisoned my property. You killed my fish. I am entitled to know what chemicals you used. This is not a request. If you do not provide that information right now, I am going to assume you are hiding something, and I will act accordingly." Gerald cleared his throat. "Now, let us all stay calm here. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," I said, not taking my eyes off Debra. "She dumped chemicals in my pond without permission and without warning. That is illegal. And now she is refusing to tell me what she used. That makes it worse." Debra crossed her arms. "I do not appreciate your tone. The HOA has the authority to maintain community health and safety. If you continue to harass me, I will have no choice but to issue a violation notice." "A violation notice? For what?" "Aggressive and threatening behavior toward board members. It is in the covenant, section 19. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You are unbelievable." "Fine, I will get my answers another way. But I promise you, Debra, if you broke the law here, I will make sure there are consequences." I walked out before I said something I would regret. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was pure rage. I had dealt with difficult people throughout my career, bureaucrats and corporate executives who thought they were untouchable. But there was something particularly infuriating about a small-time tyrant with a tiny amount of power who wielded it like a weapon. Professor Chen called me that afternoon. "Yuri, we need to talk about these samples. Can you come to the lab?" His tone made my stomach drop. "What did you find?" "Not over the phone. Come in." I was in my car within 5 minutes. The drive to campus felt like it took hours, even though it was only 20 minutes. Professor Chen was waiting for me outside the lab, which was unusual. He motioned for me to follow him to his private office, away from the students and other faculty. He closed the door and pulled up data on his computer screen. Your HOA did not use mosquito larvicide in your pond? What did they use? That is the concerning part. I found high concentrations of glyphosate, atrazine, and 2,4-D. These are herbicides, Yuri, weed killers, industrial strength. I stared at the screen, reading the numbers but not quite processing them. Herbicides? Extremely high concentrations, enough to kill everything in that pond. Plants, fish, amphibians. This was not mosquito control. This was eradication. Why would they do that? Professor Chen pulled up another window with photos. These are aerial shots of your neighborhood from the county GIS database. Look at the area behind your property. I leaned closer. Behind my 3 acres, there was undeveloped land, about 20 acres of wetlands that had been preserved as part of the county's environmental protection program. The developer had been required to leave it untouched when Meadowbrook Estates was built. I do not understand. What does this have to do with my pond? I did some digging after I saw these results. Your HOA filed an application with the county 6 months ago to purchase that wetland area for development. They wanted to expand the neighborhood, build another 60 homes. The county would never approve that. It is protected wetland. Exactly. The application was denied. But here's where it gets interesting. 3 weeks ago, the same law firm that represents your HOA filed an appeal, claiming that the wetland area poses a health risk to the community due to mosquito breeding and that it is causing water quality issues in nearby properties. The pieces started falling into place in my mind, and I felt sick. My pond. If your pond becomes contaminated, and if they can show that the contamination is coming from the wetlands behind your property, they have a case for environmental remediation, which would give them grounds to argue that the wetlands should be drained and filled. But the contamination did not come from the wetlands. It came from the HOA dumping herbicides in my pond. Professor Chen nodded grimly. But if they can blame the wetlands, show that water flowing from that area is causing problems for homeowners, they have a reason to push for development. Your pond connects to the wetland through groundwater flow. I checked the geological surveys. What they did to your pond could be the first step in manufacturing evidence of a problem that does not exist. I sat down heavily in his office chair. This was bigger than I thought. This was not just Debra being petty or overstepping her authority. This was premeditated fraud. Environmental fraud that could destroy a protected ecosystem for profit. I need a full written report, I said. Everything you found. I need it documented. I will have it ready tomorrow. Yuri, you need to take this to the authorities. This is serious. I know, but I need to be absolutely sure first. If I am going to accuse the HOA of environmental fraud, I need evidence they cannot refute. I spent that evening researching. I pulled county records, HOA meeting minutes, development proposals. Everything was public record if you knew where to look. And I did. By midnight, I had a timeline that made my blood boil. 8 months ago, a development company called Pinnacle Properties had approached the HOA board about purchasing the wetlands. Pinnacle was owned by Debra's brother-in-law. 6 months ago, the formal application was filed. 2 months ago, after the county denied it, the HOA had suddenly started sending out notices about mosquito problems and health concerns related to standing water. Last month, they had hired an environmental consultant who had never actually visited our neighborhood to write a report about water quality issues. And 3 weeks ago, the appeal was filed with the county. My pond was not the problem. My pond was the excuse. I looked up the rest of the board members. Besides Debra and Gerald, there was Patricia Morrison, who worked in real estate, Thomas Brennan, who owned a construction company, and Jennifer Kowalski, the only board member who had voted against the wetland development proposal according to the meeting minutes I found. I needed to talk to Jennifer. I found her address in the HOA directory and drove over the next morning. She lived in one of the smaller houses on the edge of the development, a modest 2-bedroom cottage with a garden that put everyone else's landscaping to shame. She answered the door in gardening gloves, dirt smudged on her cheek. "Yuri Sanchez, right? The pond guy?" That is me. Do you have a few minutes to talk? She glanced back into her house, then stepped outside and closed the door. If this is about what I think it is about, we should talk in the garden. I do not trust that Debra has not bugged my house at this point. I followed her around to her backyard, where raised beds overflowed with vegetables and herbs. She pulled off her gloves and sat on a bench under a pergola covered in flowering vines. You voted against the wetland development, I said. I did, and I've been paying for it ever since. Debra tried to fine me for 17 different covenant violations in the last 2 months. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My garden beds were 6 inches too tall. My fence was not regulation cedar. All made up nonsense. She is trying to force you off the board. Oh, she succeeded. I resigned last week. I could not afford to keep fighting the fines. She had Thomas write them up with his construction company letterhead, making them look official. My lawyer said I would win in court, but it would cost more than just paying the fines. Did you know they dumped herbicides in my pond? Jennifer's expression darkened. What? I told her everything. The chemical analysis, Professor Chen's theory about manufacturing evidence, the connection to Pinnacle properties. She listened with growing horror on her face. I knew Debra was corrupt, but I did not think she would go this far. That wetland is home to 2 protected species. If she drains it, the environmental damage would be catastrophic. I need to know if you have any documentation from the board meetings, emails, memos, anything that shows they planned this. I do not have much. Debra was very careful about what she put in writing, but there was one conference call about 6 months ago, right after they met with Pinnacle Properties. I recorded it. You recorded it? I had already started to suspect something was off. I wanted to protect myself. I have it on my phone. She pulled out her cell and scrolled through her files. Here. This is from October. She hit play, and I heard Debra's voice come through clearly. We need to establish a pattern of environmental and health concerns related to the wetlands. Gerald, I need you to start documenting mosquito complaints. Patricia, work with some of your real estate contacts to create comps showing how the wetlands are affecting property values. Thomas, get me cost estimates for drainage work. Another voice, Gerald. What about the homeowners who do not have complaints? Debra. Then we need to create complaints. Talk to people, explain the health risks, make them understand that the wetlands are a problem that needs to be solved. A third voice, Patricia. What about Jennifer? She is not going to go along with this. Debra. Jennifer is 1 vote. She cannot stop us if we have documentation and community support. We just need to be smart about this. Nothing in writing that directly connects the Pinnacle deal to our community concerns. Keep them separate. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, laying out their entire strategy. It was damning. It was exactly what I needed. Can I get a copy of this? I asked. Jennifer sent it to my email. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure they cannot get away with this. My next stop was the County Environmental Services Office. I brought everything, water samples, lab reports, the recording, the timeline I had built, and aerial photos. I asked to speak to whoever handled wetland protection enforcement. They sent me to Martin Rodriguez, a wildlife officer who looked like he had spent most of his career outdoors. He had that weathered face and steady gaze of someone who took conservation seriously. I spent an hour walking him through everything I had discovered. He listened without interrupting, taking notes and examining my documentation. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. This is fraud. Environmental fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, potentially illegal dumping of toxic chemicals. This goes way beyond HOA overreach. Can you do something about it? I can open an investigation. With what you have here, I can get the State Environmental Protection Agency involved too. But I need to warn you, this is going to take time. Months, maybe longer, and your HOA is going to come after you hard when they realize what you have done. They already are. It is going to get worse. People like this, when they are cornered, they get desperate. You need to protect yourself legally. I nodded. I know, but I cannot let them destroy that wetland. Those species you mentioned, I have seen them in my pond. Wood storks, gopher frogs. They migrate between my property and the wetlands. If Debra drains that area, it is not just environmental damage. It is extinction. Martin stood and held out his hand. Give me 2 days to loop in my supervisors and get the state involved. Do not confront your HOA until we have our investigation officially opened. Once it is, they will be legally prohibited from retaliating against you. Until then, keep your head down. I shook his hand. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. This is going to be messy. He was right. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA legal team. It was 15 pages long, detailing alleged covenant violations I had supposedly committed. My dock was not approved by the Architectural Review Committee. My pond was not permitted construction. My property line fence was 6 inches too tall. The landscaping near my driveway violated color palette requirements. Each violation came with a $500 fine. Total damages, $7,500 to be paid within 30 days, or the HOA would place a lien on my property. I called Martin Rodriguez immediately. They are trying to force me out. The investigation is officially open as of this morning. Forward me that letter. This is retaliation, and now they have made it obvious. This actually helps us. It does not feel helpful. They are threatening my house. Do not pay those fines. Do not respond to them. Let them escalate. Every aggressive move they make now is evidence of retaliation. We want them to bury themselves. It went against every instinct I had, but I trusted Martin. I forwarded the letter and tried to focus on other things, tried being the key word. It is hard to focus when your HOA is threatening to take your home. 3 days later, I got a visit from the county sheriff. Deputy Thomas Carmichael stood on my porch looking apologetic. Mr. Sanchez, I am sorry to bother you, but I need to ask you some questions. There has been a complaint filed. What kind of complaint? Your HOA president, Debra Hutchins, claims you have been harassing her, threatening behavior, stalking, verbal assault. She wants a restraining order. I felt my jaw clench. That is completely false. She has statements from several witnesses, other board members who say you confronted Ms. Hutchins aggressively, that you showed up at the HOA office and refused to leave, that you have been following her in your vehicle. I went to the HOA office once to request information about chemicals they dumped on my property. I was there for maybe 30 minutes. I did not threaten anyone, and I have certainly not been stalking Debra Hutchins. Deputy Carmichael pulled out a notepad. Can you tell me your side of what happened? I walked him through everything, starting with the dead fish and ending with the fraud investigation. I showed him the lab reports, the timeline, Jennifer's recording. He listened carefully, his expression growing more serious. Have you told the HOA that you reported them to Environmental Services? No. They should not know about the investigation yet. Then they are trying to preempt you, get ahead of whatever you might say by painting you as unstable. I have seen this before. People with power trying to discredit someone before they can expose wrongdoing. Are you going to arrest me? No, I do not see any evidence of the behavior Ms. Hutchins described, but I do need to file a report about this visit. Be careful, Mr. Sanchez. If she is as connected as you say, she might have friends in places that can make your life difficult. After he left, I called my lawyer. I had not wanted to involve legal counsel yet, hoping the state investigation would be enough. But Debra was escalating faster than I anticipated. My lawyer, Robert Chen, no relation to Professor Chen, had handled my real estate closing when I bought the house. He listened to my situation and agreed to take the case. First thing we do is file for an injunction against those fines. The HOA cannot retaliate against a homeowner for reporting illegal activity. Second, I am going to send them a cease and desist letter regarding the false police report. Third, we document everything from this point forward, every interaction, every letter, every conversation. If this goes to court, we want an airtight case. How much is this going to cost? I will be honest with you, Yuri. This could get expensive. HOA litigation is messy and it sounds like they have resources. But if you have the documentation you described, you have a strong case. And if the state investigation goes your way, you might be able to recover your legal costs. Might. That word hung in the air between us. I had retirement savings, but a prolonged legal battle could drain them. Still, what choice did I have? Let Debra destroy a protected wetland and get away with fraud? Do it, I said. Whatever it takes. The next 2 weeks were tense. I stayed on my property, avoided the HOA office, and documented everything. I set up security cameras around my house after someone knocked over my mailbox in the middle of the night. My neighbor 2 houses down, an older man named Frank, who had always been friendly, suddenly stopped waving when he saw me. The HOA newsletter, which Debra wrote herself, included a notice about homeowners who put personal interests above community welfare and spread false accusations against dedicated volunteers. She never mentioned me by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Then things got weird. I woke up one morning to find my pond drained. Not naturally, but drained. Someone had cut through the liner at the lowest point, and all the water had flowed out overnight. Years of work completely destroyed. The remaining dead plants lay in the mud like a graveyard. My dock sat at an awkward angle, partially collapsed without water to support the floating platform. I called the police. The same deputy, Carmichael, showed up and took photos. "Did you see anyone on your property last night?" "No, I checked the security cameras, but whoever did this came from the wetlands side where I do not have coverage. They would have had to hike through the protected area to get here. That is trespassing on county land. I will file this as vandalism and criminal trespassing, but without footage, it is going to be hard to prove who did it." "I know who did it. Knowing and proving are different things, Mr. Sanchez." I called Martin Rodriguez next. He drove out to see the damage himself, bringing a state environmental protection agent named Susan Crawford. She was a short woman with gray hair and an expression that suggested she had seen too much environmental crime to be shocked by anything anymore. "They are getting desperate," she said, photographing the drained pond. "This is destruction of evidence. They know we are investigating, and they are trying to eliminate the contamination before we can do our own testing." "I still have the original samples," I said, "which is why you are smart. But this escalates things. They have moved from fraud to actively obstructing an investigation. I'm going to recommend we move faster on this. We were planning to wait another month before interviewing the board members, but I think we need to do it now before they destroy anything else." 2 days later, environmental protection agents showed up at Debra's house at 7 in the morning with a search warrant. They showed up at Gerald's house, Patricia's office, and Thomas's construction company at the same time. Coordinated raids designed to prevent them from coordinating their stories. I was not there, obviously, but Martin Rodriguez called me that afternoon to give me an update. We seized financial records, email correspondence, and phones from all 4 board members. Jennifer Kowalski has been cooperating fully. The evidence is exactly what we thought. Debra's brother-in-law promised the board members significant kickbacks if the Pinnacle Properties deal went through. We are looking at fraud, conspiracy, environmental crimes, and now obstruction of justice. What happens next? The State Attorney General's office is taking over. This is criminal now, not just regulatory. They will decide whether to file charges. But based on what we have, I would be very surprised if arrests were not made. How long? Could be weeks, could be months. Justice moves slowly. But you did good, Yuri. That wetland is going to be protected now. I should have felt relief. Instead, I just felt tired. My pond was destroyed. My savings were being eaten by legal fees. Half my neighborhood thought I was a troublemaker. And Debra was still free, still living in her house, still president of the HOA. That changed in April. I was having coffee on my porch, looking at the muddy crater where my pond used to be, when I saw the police cars drive past, 3 of them heading toward Debra's house. Then, an unmarked sedan that I recognized as the state investigator's vehicle. They were there for about an hour before Debra emerged in handcuffs. She saw me watching from my porch. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the hatred in her expression. She mouthed something I could not hear but could certainly interpret. Then they put her in the back of a police car and drove away. Gerald and Patricia were arrested the same morning. Thomas turned himself in that afternoon after his lawyer negotiated surrender terms. The charges were extensive: conspiracy to commit fraud, environmental crimes, embezzlement of HOA funds, making false statements to government officials, and obstruction of justice. Jennifer Kowalski called me that evening. "It is over. The board is dissolved. The county is appointing an interim management company to run the HOA until we can hold new elections." What about the Pinnacle deal? Dead. The county has reinforced the wetland protections and flagged the area as under active conservation monitoring. No one is getting permits to develop there for decades. And my property? The interim management company is dropping all fines and violations against you. They are also reviewing Debra's decision to dump chemicals in your pond. You should talk to your lawyer about suing the HOA for damages. Robert Chen was already on it. Within a week, we had filed a lawsuit against the HOA for destruction of property, emotional distress, and legal costs. The HOA's insurance company settled immediately for $85,000. It was more than enough to rebuild my pond and cover my legal fees. The criminal trial took 8 months. I testified, as did Professor Chen, Martin Rodriguez, Susan Crawford, and Jennifer Kowalski. The prosecution laid out the entire conspiracy in meticulous detail. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Debra Hutchins was convicted on all counts. She received 3 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay $200,000 in restitution to the county for environmental damage. Gerald got 18 months, Patricia got 2 years, Thomas got probation because his lawyer managed to convince the jury he had been a passive participant who just went along with the others. I attended the sentencing hearing. I wanted to hear what Debra had to say. She stood before the judge, looking smaller somehow, without her HOA president authority to hide behind. Her lawyer gave the usual speech about her years of community service, her clean record, her remorse. Then the judge asked if she wanted to make a statement. Debra looked at me in the gallery. I was trying to do what was best for the community. Property values, safety, progress. Sometimes you have to make hard choices. I am sorry it turned out this way. No apology for killing my fish. No acknowledgement of trying to destroy a protected wetland. No mention of the fraud. Just, sorry it turned out this way. As if she had been caught in bad luck rather than deliberate criminal activity. The judge was not impressed. Ms. Hutchins, you held a position of trust in your community, and you abused that trust for personal financial gain. You attempted to destroy protected wildlife habitat. You harassed and retaliated against homeowners who questioned your authority. You showed no remorse during this entire process. 3 years in federal prison is lenient considering the scope of your crimes. I walked out of that courthouse feeling something I had not felt in months. Peace. It was not satisfaction exactly, not victory. Just the quiet knowledge that justice had been done, that the system had worked the way it was supposed to. I spent the summer rebuilding my pond. I hired a professional this time, someone who specialized in natural ecosystems. We went bigger, deeper, with better filtration and more native plants. I installed solar-powered aerators and underwater lighting. It cost more than the insurance settlement, but I did not care. This pond was not just a hobby anymore. It was proof that you could fight corruption and win. The new koi arrived in September. I spent hours selecting them, choosing the most beautiful specimens I could find. A few of the old plants had survived in the mud, and they came back stronger than before. Within a month, frogs returned. Within 2 months, I saw dragonflies. By October, a great blue heron had claimed my pond as part of its territory. And one evening in November, just before sunset, I saw Sherman. The old turtle I thought had died during the poisoning emerged from the wetlands and crawled back into my pond like he had never left. He must have escaped when he smelled the chemicals, hiding in the protected area until it was safe to return. I sat on my dock and watched him swim lazy circles through the clear water. My coffee was getting cold in my hand, but I did not move. This moment, this simple peace, was what Debra and her accomplices had tried to take from me. And they had failed. The HOA held new elections in December. Jennifer Kowalski ran for president and won by a landslide. Her first act was to amend the HOA covenant to add protections for homeowner-maintained natural features and to require transparent reporting of all HOA activities. Her second act was to issue a formal apology to me on behalf of the community. I did not need the apology, but I appreciated it. Life in Meadowbrook Estates slowly returned to normal. The neighbors who had shunned me started waving again, some of them stopping by to apologize for believing Debra's lies. Frank from 2 houses down brought me a bottle of bourbon and spent an hour on my porch talking about how he had suspected something was wrong, but had been too afraid of Debra to say anything. "She ruled this place like a dictator," he said. "I am glad you had the guts to stand up to her. Most of us were just trying to keep our heads down and avoid fines." "Someone had to do it." "Yeah, but it did not have to be you. You could have moved. Could have just paid the fines and let her win. Why did you fight so hard?" I thought about that question. Because it was not just about my pond. It was about that wetland, those protected species, the idea that someone could commit fraud and environmental crimes just to make money. If we let people like Debra get away with that, what kind of community are we? Frank nodded slowly. "I guess that is why she lost and you won. She only cared about money. You cared about what was right." After he left, I sat on my dock and watched the sunset paint the water orange and pink. The koi came to the surface, hoping for food. I tossed them some pellets and listened to the evening chorus of frogs beginning their nightly concert. In the distance, I heard a wood store call from the wetlands. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Professor Chen. "Saw the news about the sentencing. Justice served. By the way, I've been monitoring water samples from the wetland. Everything is recovering beautifully. You saved it, Yuri." I looked out at my pond, at the wetlands beyond, at the ecosystem I had helped protect. It had cost me time, money, stress, and countless sleepless nights. It had turned my peaceful retirement into a legal battle that consumed nearly a year of my life. But sitting there on my dock, watching Sherman the turtle surface for air and dive back down into clean water, I knew I would do it all again. Because some things are worth fighting for. Not because it is easy. Not because you are guaranteed to win, but because letting corruption and greed destroy something beautiful is a choice, and I refused to make that choice. The pond was not just water and fish and plants anymore. It was a testament to the idea that ordinary people could still stand up to power and win, that environmental laws meant something. That community was about more than property values and profit margins. It was proof that even a retired engineer with a modest pond could make a difference when he refused to back down. I finished my coffee and went inside as the last light faded from the sky. Tomorrow I would start planning a native plant expansion. Jennifer had approved my proposal to create a buffer zone between the development and the wetlands, a corridor that would allow wildlife to move safely between the protected area and our properties. Several other homeowners had already expressed interest in converting their manicured lawns to natural landscaping. Debra had tried to pave over nature for profit. Instead, her crimes had inspired a conservation movement in our little community. The irony was not lost on me. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No anxiety about legal proceedings, no anger about injustice, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had done what needed to be done, and it had been enough. The HOA would never threaten my pond again. The wetlands were protected, the criminals were in prison, and Sherman the turtle was back home where he belonged. Sometimes that is all you can ask for. Sometimes that is everything.